Congressman, thank you so much for joining us again. We're now two failed votes into Jim Jordan's prospects for Speaker. What's the end game here for your conference?
You know, the fact that Kevin McCarthy got ousted by 8 Republicans and all the Democrats, I thought was a mistake. And now we're seeing why, because we've gone weeks now without a speaker in the chair. It's chaos, it's dysfunctional, and now we're living in very dangerous times. Since that time, we've had Hamas invade Israel, and Israel's at war. And so I think it's very a dangerous game to be playing politically. We need a speaker in the chair as soon as possible. And if we can't elect one at 217 votes, then I think we need to give the Speaker pro tem temporary powers so that we can move, emergency legislation that I'm working on dealing with these national security issues.
That would entail a resolution giving Patrick McHenry essentially the jobs of Speaker for the time being. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think until for the length of the continuing resolution, which is November 17th, we have to finish our appropriations process. I've got a resolution with 425 co-sponsors, historic number, condemning Hamas and in support of Israel, which is very important for people in Israel to know that the American people, through their representatives, support them at this critical time. I've also been in discussions at the White House, National Security Council, talking about national security aid packages, both to Israel, the Ukraine package, a border security package, and also a Indo-Pacific package that would counter China against Taiwan.
You laid it out there. We're playing in all of these different areas of the world, countering so many threats. What strain does that put on our country and our Congress during these turbulent political times to try and support all of our allies and counter all of our adversaries right now?
Well, you have 2, potentially 3 conflicts that could be taking place. We haven't really seen anything like this, I don't think, since my dad's war, World War II. Largest invasion in Europe since World War II, biggest threat to the Pacific, and now an all-out war in the Middle East. And so this is not a time to be vacating the speaker's chair. It's a time for governing. It's a time for adults in the room to stand up and start doing what the American people deserve and the work of the American people, and stop playing these partisan games. I think a lot of us are getting tired of it, and we realize how dangerous it is right now, and we need to get back to work.
I've heard it said that there is not a single Republican who could get to 217 right now. What's the end game here? Do you have a candidate that you would like to see that you think could realistically get there, even if it's after November 17th?
I mean, that's the problem. I think the people who ousted McCarthy didn't really have a plan. What's your plan B? And here we are. And to your point, it's going to be very hard for anybody to get to that vote count. I know McCarthy's had some discussions about running again, but I don't have a crystal ball. All I know is that in my perch as chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee, I'm marking up, 8 Iran bills next week. I need floor time. I need floor time to get these supplemental emergency bills passed and my resolution supporting Israel passed. The world is not stopping. The world's going on, and it's getting more dangerous by the day. It's not a time for us to stop governing on the House floor.
You certainly have enough on your plate already, but one name that I've heard floated as a potential speaker candidate is Chairman McCaul. Have you given any consideration to that?
Yeah, I want to see how this process goes. This is one of those jobs you don't ask for. Some would say it's a suicide mission. Why would you want a job like that? I suppose if asked by my conference to serve in that capacity, I would, for the sake of the country. But right now, I'm trying to find solutions in the foreign policy world and maybe give Speaker Pro Tem McHenry a little bit of time to get this legislation passed. But I have been flattered to have my name bantered around, but I don't think this is one of those jobs you ask for. The people that ask for it and really want it are the ones that are failing right now on the House floor.
I've heard it said that you should nominate your least favorite person for this job because it's more of a punishment than a reward, right?
And watch your back every day. It's
Sure.
almost it's a very difficult job and a razor thin majority that we have, and then it gives a very small minority of members a tremendous amount of power to go against the will of the conference and oust the speaker, when you think just 8 of them were able to accomplish that. So it has brought chaos to democracy. What I don't like about it is the people who are applauding are Mr. Putin, Chairman Xi in China. He always says democracy doesn't work, it's dysfunctional. I can make a decision like that as a dictator and I can get things done. He tells President Tsai that in Taiwan all the time. I don't want to prove him right, that somehow Communist China and Chairman Xi are right about democracy. We need to stand up and prove to the world that democracy does work. But we're not setting a good example by the charade that's going on the House floor right now.
I also want to get specifically into what those aid packages would look like. You have always been one of the most vocal advocates about confronting China's threat more directly. What tangibly does the United States need to do right now in order to support Taiwan and fend off China?
Well, we need to get the weapons systems I've already signed off on in country. There are 22 weapons systems that would be a deterrence. We need to get more maritime assets in the Taiwan Straits, like sea mines, smaller submarines. We need to work with AUKUS, which is the Australians and the UK, on making these weapon systems together at a faster rate to protect the Pacific. Chairman Xi has great ambitions. What I worry about is he's going to think we're taking our eye off the ball with what's happening in the Middle East and may think this may be the time for him to strike. And we need to send a message of deterrence that would be a grave mistake and that we are paying attention. Speaking of deterrence, we have 2 aircraft carriers and a lot of destroyers in the Eastern Mediterranean off the coast of Israel as a deterrence against Hezbollah in Lebanon, because right now we're trying to contain Gaza and contain Hamas in Gaza. The nightmare scenario would be if Hezbollah lit up in Lebanon because they're really the A team. Hamas is really the farm team. Hezbollah has 100,000 rockets and precision guided missiles that would overload the Iron Dome. And so, we got a lot of hot spots, Ryan, and deterrence is always the key. Projecting power and not projecting weakness is always, in my judgment, the best foreign policy to stop aggression and stop wars from happening.
How concerned do we need to be today about this conflict boiling over into a regional war with Iran, with Hezbollah?
Very concerned. I've been talking to a lot of our Arab partners in the region, the Israeli ambassador, the administration. I know that the president visited and tried to get Israel to kind of slow down a little bit on their, march on the ground. I mean, they've taken out a lot of control, command and control operations by strikes, surgical strikes. But when this ground operation starts, it's going to be like going house to house, like what we did in Iraq, and it's very, very dangerous. And our special operators are training them, but we have to be very careful how we carry or how they carry that out, because we don't want the narrative from Hamas all of a sudden taking over in the Middle East and then rising with Hezbollah turning its sights on Israel. That's the biggest fear, is escalation. So we want to make sure that the situation currently does not escalate. That's why we're taking some time to get the civilians, the Palestinian civilians, to the south of Gaza, and then get humanitarian aid to them as soon as possible through the Rafah Gate on the border of Egypt. And I've been working with the World Food Program on this to get to them the humanitarian assistance they need. We don't want to see 1 million people starving in Gaza, and that would blow back on Israel, and that would be the worst message that we could send. We also have 2,000 Marines in an expeditionary force in the Eastern Mediterranean as a show of strength and deterrence against Iran and Hezbollah as well. So am I concerned? Very concerned. I mean, to the point where I've been asked to start looking at an authorized use of military force that my committee is responsible for doing. Now, we don't want this, and I hope I never have to pass it out of my committee, but we have to be prepared for all contingencies.
So there's a real possibility we could see American troops on the ground in the Middle East because of it.
That's not my choice. I would not want to see that at all. I do want to give Israel everything it needs to defend herself, including, they need to replenish the Iron Dome. They need precision-guided weapons and more ammunition. And we can give them training and weapons. I prefer not to see any of our troops on the ground. However, if it escalates to out of control, that's always a contingency that we have to prepare for.
Wow. Last question for you, Chairman. The most recent news out of Gaza is obviously that terrible strike on the hospital that killed hundreds of civilians there. What's the latest intelligence surrounding who was responsible for that? Clearly, Israel was blamed first, and then they have shown some evidence that they were not responsible for it. What do we know at this hour about that?
Well, I've seen the intelligence, and I've had a briefing. This was a errant Hamas rocket that unfortunately hit this hospital and caused this damage. My recommendation to the administration is to go before the United Nations like we did in the Cuban Missile Crisis and show them the evidence that we have that's very clear as to what happened, and not make Israel the perpetrator here. I think what you're going to see, unfortunately, you're going to see Hamas's narrative to paint themselves as the victims here and Israel as the perpetrator, which is not the case. They invaded Israel. I was at the kibbutz that was massacred on the border of Gaza. I was there just a year ago, Speaker McCarthy, and I saw the people there. I saw the children in the daycare center who were massacred, slaughtered. I've seen the pictures, the decapitations, the burned bodies. Absolutely horrific what Hamas did to this kibbutz and all across southern Israel. So we got to make sure the narrative doesn't turn to blame Israel for this. Hamas is to blame for this.
Chairman, I really appreciate your time. And we appreciate the work that you're doing. Let's keep in touch throughout these crazy times we're living through. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. God bless.